Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We appreciate you joining us today for our 10.1 Next Generation Firewall Community Webinar. We're joined today by Dirk Morris, our co-founder and our vice president of our NG Firewall team, and I am Sean Gardner, our director of the NG Firewall sales team. We got a lot to cover. There's some good meat we'll be talking about, going through the change logs and other features in the new version 10.1. And for those of you that are wondering, we are going to be recording this webinar, or are recording it now, and it will be available for later use and consumption. Those that have registered will also receive the recording, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Some housekeeping: we are going to have a question and answer panel for you on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar window, so you can actually ask questions. We have staff members that will be answering those along the way. And any questions that we feel that we want to address for all people will be passed over to Dirk, and we'll get those answered for everyone. Other questions, we'll try to get to those as well throughout the webinar, but certainly we encourage you, if you need to, or if you don't get your question answered, to contact us at sales@untangle.com, and we'll definitely get you guys an answer back. If you can't hear us, let us know through the question and answer panel as well. And with that, we're going to jump right in. A lot of you have probably noticed that we have a new look and feel on our website. We have a new product line, which is based on a company that we purchased back in October called Symphonics. It's been rebranded Untangle IC Control. And then the Untangle product, as it has been known previously, is the NG Firewall product line. So, Dirk, I'm going to pass things over to you if you have any other additional comments about that.
Thanks, Sean, and thanks everybody for joining. Yeah, I'd just like to say a few words on this subject. If you could also switch the presenter too, Sean, that'd be great.
We'll do that, yeah.
So the NG Firewall is the Untangle has been known for years. 9.4, 8.0, all those are just basically now the NG Firewall, Next Generation Firewall. The IC Control is a completely separate product. There is some overlap in functionality, but IC Control is mainly meant for, first of all, it goes up to 1 gigabit, so if you're like a school district or something with a large amount of traffic, it's really good at shaping, it's really good at filtering. It is a point solution. It doesn't do firewalling stuff, so it's installed as a bridge behind your existing solution. So if you're like a school district or a large site or an enterprise, it would really be worth checking out. We love both products. They're completely separate. Both products continue to be developed. This webinar is going to be about NG Firewall 10.1 and the changes that we've implemented in 10.1. Can you see my screen, Sean?
Certainly can, yes.
Perfect. So with that being said, again, if you have any questions, contact us. At this point, I'm going to go through the 10.1 changes. As always, this is documented in the wiki. So if you go to wiki.untangle.com and you click on change logs, you can click on the 10.1 change log, and that will actually show you the major stuff that's in 10.1 relative to 10.0 and prior. So we've got a bunch of changes. I'll walk through some of these and explain. We're really excited to get some of these changes out there. One of the biggest ones is the process of downloading the apps. For those of you who've been Untangle users for a while, is now totally redone. It used to be you would install Untangle. When you were done, you finished the setup wizard, you pop out to this screen, and then you would download the apps onto the Untangle server itself. There was a long history about why we did it this way. But basically, it's not necessary anymore. Now the apps are actually included with the install. So if you get an appliance, they're on the appliance. If you download the ISO, they're actually on the ISO. So now when you're done with the wizard, you register the server with Untangle and create your store account, and then you just install the apps. There's no downloading necessary. So it really speeds things up for installing Untangle. So you'll just click on things like you normally would, and they pop in here over on the right side. And that's basically all there is to it now. You no longer pops up the screen where you have to download any of that. They just install one at a time. This also helps with things like restoring and backup, because now the apps are always there. You don't have to like download them before you restore your old config. It helps with a couple other use cases. So hopefully that'll make your life simpler. It definitely makes the install processor a little bit faster and simpler. One of the other major features we have that we're really excited about, that people have been asking for close to 10 years now, is high availability. What this is basically the ability to run 2 Untangle servers on your network, and if one fails, the other one will automatically pick up the traffic. So there's a couple things to know about how this works. Basically, this leverages VRRP, Virtual Router Redundancy Protocol, and what happens is the 2 Untangles communicate with each other, and actually you can run 3, so the 3 Untangles communicate each other. You can run as many as you want. They communicate, and one of them says, okay, I'm in charge. I'm the one that's handling traffic. And the other ones sit by idly saying, okay, that guy's in charge. If that guy, the person in charge that's routing all the traffic and handling all the traffic, dies, stops responding, NICs gets unplugged, loses power, whatever, the other one, the next one in line will basically pick up the traffic. And this happens so quickly that you actually won't even notice any downtime. So if you set up 2 Untangle boxes, one's the master, you unplug it, the next one, the secondary one, will automatically pick up traffic. You won't even lose a ping. All the sessions will switch over and start going through there. So it's really useful for people that are concerned with uptime on their network. I'm going to go through a couple scenarios of how you would configure this. Let me actually just show the configuration for it first. You click on Network. Oh, now my Firefox is dead. Thank you, Firefox. And let's say here's our internal network. Let's click on Edit there. You scroll down to the bottom. There's a new area called Redundancy VRRP Configuration. So if you show that, you'll see the VRRP options. The way to set this up is there's a couple different scenarios. If you go to wiki.untangle.com, click on Network, click on Networking Configuration Documentation, there's a whole section on VRRP. And there's a couple ways to set it up. It only works with Untangle as your router. You can't use this in bridge mode. So the first step is installing Untangle as your router if it's not already your router. The second step would be setting up your second Untangle. Basically, you want to make it identical to the first Untangle. And in this case, let's say you want 192.168.1.1 to be your internal router. You would set that up as the VRRP virtual address on both machines. So both machines basically say, we're going to share this address. And then you configure it such that they're in the same group. They're going to negotiate over who actually uses that address. All your machines in the internal network use that address as their gateway. And basically, whichever one's in charge is going to handle the traffic for that address. And if I unplug this one machine, this machine will automatically become the master and start handling traffic. So it's actually really simple. This is what the configuration would look like. You have the shared address be the same on both. One of them has a higher priority. That's going to be the one in charge. And they have the same group ID. You can also use it on the external and the internal. So you can have full redundancy inbound and outbound. This is important if you have port forwards or internal services like mail servers. And all this is documented in the wiki. A couple of things to keep in mind. When traffic does switch from one Untangle to the other, the sessions will be reset. Usually you don't notice that because things like web traffic and things have very short-lived sessions. But if you were doing a large download, that would be reset because the second Untangle doesn't have the state for that session. Also, other things to keep in mind that there's no state sharing between the Untangles. So things like quotas and penalty boxes and email quarantines and reports and captive portal logins, none of that gets shared. They're basically 2 completely independent Untangle boxes. And so when traffic switches to the other one, it'll be like you've just plugged in a new Untangle server into your network. So, for example, if you're using captive portal, you may have some undesired side effects. So just keep that in mind when you're using this. The other thing to keep in mind is a lot of people ask, well, I've got a premium subscription on my primary. Do I need a premium subscription on my secondary? It really depends on how you want to do it. Most of the time I'd say no. Usually what people want is when their primary fails to make sure the network stays online, in which case you really don't need a full premium package on the second one. It's just going to pick up traffic when this one happens to die, which is pretty rare. I mean, it's going to be like a major catastrophic failure of this one where this one's even going to process any traffic. So if that's the case, probably just setting up the same routing configuration in the light package is all you're going to need. So it's really personal preference, but most of the time I'd say no, you don't really need a second premium package. But some people prefer to do it that way. Are there any questions on VRRP so far? currently
Quick clarification,
VRP.
Dirk. We don't have any discounted licensing for that secondary subscription, so just people need to be aware of that as well. So
That's correct. It's just the same Untangle. You need the same license. VRP does not distribute load. This is not load balance between it. Basically, this is the master. It's going to handle all the traffic until it goes down or some failure, in which case there's a constant voting protocol going between. This example just has 2, but you could run more than 2. When the master disappears, the other guys are going to say, wait a minute, nobody's handling this traffic, and they're going to hold an election for the guy with the next highest priority, and then that server would take over and handle the routing. So there is no load balancing. It's basically a hot spare. And if you can test this by basically installing it, unplugging the NIC, and noticing that in less than a second the other one will take over and start handling traffic. Currently, VRP does not handle multiple WAN IP addresses. You can easily set up aliases still to handle multiple IP addresses, but the case where you have this, your port forwards, VRP just currently has 1 address, so you need to keep that in mind when setting it up. I'm reading the other questions. Usually you install both these into the same switch right here and the same out here. So, and external goes to the same switch which goes to your modem, internal goes to the switch which goes to your internal network. Branding Manager, it depends on how you install. If you install Branding Manager on this one and this one, then it'll have the same branding. I actually find it useful to have different branding on the second one so that you know when it fails over, because the block page will have a different logo and the login page will have a different logo if you're going to this address. So I've actually found it somewhat interesting to add a different branding logo to your secondary so that you know when it fails over. A lot of times you won't necessarily notice if it fails over because traffic picks up so quickly. Yes, you can upgrade from 10.0 to 10.1. In fact, upgrades are available to everyone in the 10.0. So if you want to get 10.1, just go in and hit upgrade or hit system information. You may already be there if you have automatic upgrades on. So click system info and you can check your version there. You may have already been upgraded if you have automatic upgrades on. If not, you will have upgrades available.
Sorry, Dirk, just to reiterate, we had a couple questions here. You can run light on your second box if you don't mind it failing over to light. If you are concerned about having Branding Manager or any other paid application present in a failover scenario, then you need to have a paid license for either those individual apps or for that package on the second box.
Thanks, Amy. We're reading through the other questions. A lot of questions about VRP. The good thing is once you get in and play with it, it's extremely simple. It doesn't. The only case where I think you may run into issues is where you have lots of external IPs, which is not a case that's currently supported in terms of sharing those IPs. You can obviously set up aliases on the different boxes. And you also don't necessarily have to do two-way VRP. You can just do one-way, which would basically say it'll work outbound. Your internal clients won't necessarily lose connection.
Also, a quick reminder for any of you that have bought an Untangle appliance as well, if you've bought a cold spare with that, you can actually easily, through this process, turn that into a hot spare now. So
the 10.0 to 10.1 upgrade is really quick. It doesn't require a reboot. It has about 5 seconds of downtime, 5 to 10 seconds. Future upgrades will actually have less than a second of downtime. So the upgrade's not very serious from 10.0 to 10.1. There is no upgrade from 9.4 and prior. We continue to maintain 10.4, support 10.4 for a long time to come, or excuse me, 9.4 for a long time to come.
If you want to upgrade, if you want to upgrade from 9.4 to 10.0, you can also just get an appliance, and it comes with 10.1 installed on it. Correct, Dirk?
Yes, I think they will soon start shipping with 10.1 installed on them.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. In this scenario, excuse me, in this scenario where you're running double VRP on external and internal, if the internal, let's say you unplug the internal, these are grouped so that you'll never have a scenario where this guy's handling the internal address and the other guy's handling the external address. When this guy loses the internal, he'll also basically give up the external so that the secondary device will pick up both the internal and the external handling. So you'll never have a failure mode where basically the internal's here and the external's there. Are there any noticeable holes in security? No, not really. I mean, all your sessions are going to get reset, which you probably won't notice because most traffic's web traffic. But if you were doing something like an SSH session or an RDP session that fails over, it's going to get reset. But basically, all policies start from scratch because there's zero state on the secondary untangle. So basically, nobody's trusted. All state's lost. You're going to go back to your default as if you just rebooted Untangle instantly, basically, is how you can think of it. If I just virtualize my LAN gateway, does my WAN NIC on the secondary stay cold? Well, so you'll give them unique IP addresses. So you need 2 addresses to start with, and then you'll need a 3rd address for the shared one. You don't have to do this if you just want outbound. The only case where you do this is, let's say you had an email server on this address that you port forwarded internally. You obviously want, if this machines go down, this machine to handle the port forwards. If you don't have that, you don't need to do the external. It really depends on what you have internally that you need to fail over for. If you have premium standard package on the primary and light on the hot spare, would IPsec VPN disconnect during failover? Well, it's going to disconnect during failover no matter what as the session gets reset. You will need IPsec on your secondary one if you want it to work. It's definitely going to get reset, though, because the second IPsec is different than the first. I wouldn't really encourage using VPN with it, but I guess you could. Currently, only one VRRP external address is configured. If you look at the configuration page, it only is going to allow one address. And we've considered making it a list, but we haven't done so at this time. That's a little more involved. So currently, you just enable it and type in the address that you want it to share. Does VRP work with dual WANs? Sure, you can do that. I mean, I didn't show that in this configuration because it's a little more messy, but you could set up VRP on 3 interfaces if you wanted to. Internal, an external 1, and external 2. Your brain may explode, but certainly it works fine. Or you could say, I want redundancy on this WAN but not that WAN. You can do all sorts of things. On the second Untangle box, there is no syncing. So there's no state share between these Untangled. There are 2 Untangle servers. It's not going to copy settings. It's not going to share sessions. It's not going to do any of that stuff. So if you want them configured, you need to configure them the same. Or just, configure one, do a backup, and then come over here and restore it, except for the network settings. So when you go in, let me close this. Let's say you get your Untangle 1 set up exactly the way you want it. Go in, create a backup, and then come in here and restore. And when you're given the option restore, make sure you say restore all except for the network settings. So basically your 2 Untangles will be identical in all ways except for the network settings because they have different network configurations. So that's probably the easiest way to keep the 2 synced. Just go in here, back up, go in secondary Untangle, restore. and do everything but network settings, and then set up the network settings according to this diagram. Does 10.1 resolve the PPTP issue discovered here? I've been following that thread for quite a while on the forums. Somebody posted the PPTP. If you have an issue with PPTP, just call support. There's no known issues. As far as I know, every issue has been resolved. We always get, the forums are great, but they also have a downside if we get these urban legends born about certain issues. If you have an issue, call support. We'd love to help you. There's no known issues in 10.0 or 10.1 with PPTP. As far as I know, every configuration that we've gotten to, we've figured out the issue and got it working. So give us a call. All right, let me jump back into change logs. We got tons of questions, but I got a lot of stuff to cover. Some really great new features in WebFilter, moving on from high availability. With 10.0, we rolled out HTS Inspector. HTS Inspector is incredibly powerful. For those of you who run it, basically, or haven't run it, what it does is it unencrypts all HTTPS traffic, and then it sends it through all the apps as regular HTTP, and then on the other side, it re-encrypts it before it sends it out the Untangle server. So basically, it allows you to fully inspect and control HTTPS traffic. The downside of it is part of the unencryption process is creating a cert from a certificate authority on Untangle and presenting it to your client to say, I am Yahoo, you can trust me. This is necessary as part of the decrypting process. So what that means is your local browser, in this case, is going to show a warning saying, wait a minute, I don't know who the certificate authority is. So you have to go around to every machine and install the certificate. In some organizations, they don't want to do that, so we actually tried to make HTTPS control a little bit better if you're not bringing HTTPS Inspector in 10.1, because that's actually the majority of configurations out there. So we added some new features in WebFilter that make the HTTPS inspection without HTTPS Inspector better. So basically, we redid these options. Now it will categorize HTTPS traffic by server name information, indication, SNI, if it's in the stream. That was always there. The new option is that it will now, if SNI is not present, it will fetch the certificate out of line and use that certificate to identify the traffic and categorize it. And then finally, lastly, if neither of those work, it'll use the IP, which used to be the old way. This second option is the new one. This significantly improves the HTTPS categorization. So for those of you not running HTTPS Inspector on your network, HTTPS handling will be much better in WebFilter. There's also some nice new features where we actually show the block page when you're blocked. So no longer does it just reset the connection. Now it will actually show a block page. There's a couple things to be aware of that. When you're showing the block page and you're not running HTTPS Inspector, the client is not going to trust the certificate that we used to write the block page. So you will get a warning. The client will have to accept that warning, and then he'll see the block page. There's no way around that warning, unfortunately, without importing the certificate authority into the end client. But we figured that was better than just resetting connection, which is no feedback to the user that something's gone wrong at all. So we're looking forward to get that change out there. I think that'll make HTTPS blocking a lot more convenient. We've also made a similar thing with HTTPS Inspector, or excuse me, Captive Portal, that Captive Portal now catches HTTPS. You'll then have to accept a warning, wait a minute, this is not actually Yahoo, which is what I typed in my browser, and then you'll get the Captive Portal login page. It'll redirect you to the Captive Portal login page. The issue previously is if you have an HTTPS home page and you open up your browser and you're not authenticated via Captive Portal, you get nothing. So now you'll get a warning that says once you accept it, you'll get redirected to the Captive Portal login page. Again, none of this is an issue to running HTTPS Inspector, which is a whole different technique to handle HTTPS. We also added some nice functionality to the Captive Portal. It's kind of experimental. It's a work in progress. On the Captive page, there's now a test that says enable test to verify the server root certificate is installed on the client device. If you enable this, basically the actual Captive Portal login page will test to see if Untangle's root CA is installed on that client. And if not, it will present a warning, and allow the user to download the root CA. This is a nice, easy way to push out Untangle's root CA to all the devices. So that may be worth playing with if you're running HTS Inspector as a way to easily push out the root CA to all the devices. If you do give it a try, give us some feedback. Like I said, it's kind of an experimental work in progress. All right, let me look over the questions real quick. We're looking pretty good on the questions.
Hey, Derek, real quick, back on the new checkbox and web filter.
Uh-huh.
Is it recommended to have all of those boxes checked?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
I would, yes. Almost always, the default settings are correct. This is one of those cases where I would just leave it as the default.
All right.
The issue before was, I'm trying to make sure I say this right, categorization was really poor on XP machines because they don't have SNI, so it would downfall to IP address. And unfortunately, then your pass list wouldn't work because all of a sudden we just see encrypted traffic. So even if you'd say block social networking but pass facebook.com and you're using XP, it would still get blocked because, well, SNI wasn't there and all it knows is IP address. Now it will say, wait a minute, this is Facebook. I know this is Facebook. Facebook's in the pass list, so I'm going to let it through. So really where this helps significantly is cases where SNI is not included, which is XP, old browsers, any kind of HTTP library from several applications, like all the major browsers, Chrome and Firefox, IE, and all the modern ones anyway, all support SNI. But a lot of back-end HTTP and HTTPS libraries do not support SNI, so this helps there as well. You'll just find in general the HTTPS handling is much better with the certificate technique than IP-based. And it will always revert to IP-based, which is extremely rare because it only happens when the server certificate fetching fails.
That's great. Thank you.
Can you explain the YouTube for Schools? Sure. Enforce YouTube for Schools, basically, all it does is, if you read in the documentation, it links to YouTube's explanation. It basically, every time you go to YouTube, it appends the URL saying, this is my organization ID, which allows YouTube to identify which organization you are and YouTube to enforce your policy. So all Untangle does is put a tag, basically, in the URL that says, I am FUBAR Schools. And then YouTube says, okay, FUBAR Schools, here's your policy. And then you go to YouTube and configure your policy, which may be, here you can only watch these 10 videos, or you can only watch educational videos, or whatever. So it basically forcefully identifies all YouTube traffic on your network to be associated with your organization, and then Google/YouTube enforces the actual policy on their end. I had to disable HTS Inspector to get this meeting to work. You can add ignore rules for GoToMeeting. Basically, the way that's done is, let me go to a different rack. We've had to, in the past, several clients, like the, oh, you can't see this, like the GoToMeeting client on the side of my screen, it has a hard-coded root certificate list. So, in other words, even if you import it into Firefox and Windows, it's not going to trust it unless it gets the exact certificate it expects. Unfortunately, there's no way around this, so what you need to do is go into HTS Inspector, check out the event log, see what's in the event log. There should be an abandoned or something like that, which means basically this connection didn't work because either the client rejected it or there was something wrong with the server certificate, and then you can go back to create a rule that says, okay, ignore all, GoToMeeting traffic. So here, like we have a Nest thermostat, and Nest has a hard-coded root CA that it expects, so we added an ignore rule for Nest traffic. I don't know if you're familiar with those Nest thermostats. So there are cases where you have to add ignore rules in here to say don't process GoToMeeting or Citrix stuff and things like that. Okay, moving on. A couple of nice features that I'll go through quickly. Memory conservation, we put some effort into, again, lowering the memory footprint of Untangle. The way we've done that now is that certain daemons are not running. So if you turn off Spam Blocker, it doesn't run the spam daemon anymore that scans the emails. If you turn off the antivirus scanners, the virus scanners aren't running anymore. So this actually significantly lowers the memory requirements, especially if you turn off some of the apps. The goal here is to get Untangle running on even smaller, lighter boxes for those people installing in small sites in Soho. And we'll continue to work on that in the future as well. So nowadays, one of the biggest hogs is actually Virus Blocker Lite and Fish Blocker, which both require CLAM. CLAM is actually 200 megs in and of itself. So if you turn off Virus Blocker Lite and Fish Blocker, you can save yourself 200 megs. That's, of course, totally unnecessary if you're running a 1 gig box, but if you're on a 512 meg box, it's really important. So that should help on the smaller end of boxes. Application control also has some exciting new applications. On Upgrade, if you go in there and look, you'll see some new applications. One of the most exciting things is that Skype blocking actually works for now. So if you go in and block Skype, you can actually log in and then it won't make any phone calls. In the past, it would fail the first couple times and then Skype would somehow figure out a way through. It looks like the guys that we work with to do application control figured out a way to totally lock down Skype. So if you go and click tar pit on Skype, it seems to be effective for now. This is an ongoing battle, of course. They may update something, but this is the best we've ever been with Skype blocking. Now I'll go into event logs for a moment. So event logs, we've basically added a whole lot to. Click on the settings here. Let's look at the web filter event log. So we've added some major improvements to the way event logs work. They're all the same. They basically all work the same. You'll see some new options down here, and this is organized, and this is all new stuff at the top. So previously, we had these two options and the export button, which actually used to be down here, refresh and auto refresh. So those have stayed the same. The new thing is you can now select more events. There's no pagination. Usually you'd have to sort through the pages. Now you can just scroll, which is much more convenient. This is actually somewhat amazing, too, because Firefox and browsers, all browsers in general, don't handle huge data sets. So what it actually does is remove the data set from the browser when it's out of view, and it only actually stores in the browser what's in view. So this is a really cool enhancement that will get rid of the pagination, which also allowed us to add filtering. Filtering is really exciting. So let's say you're looking for a specific client that's causing problems. You can now click on a column and say, well, I only want to look at 10.28.28.125. Click Enter, and now I'm only going to see that client's traffic going to Dropbox, Microsoft, Hotmail, and so on. So you can sort by all sorts of stuff. Let's say, well, I only want to see their Zendesk traffic. Now I can see them going to Zendesk, or whatever you want. So there's all sorts of columns up here. You can filter on them. It allows you to play around with the data. You can also sort all sorts of things. There are also now columns that you could view that previously were not viewable. So the web filter event log is basically looking at web events. Web events have all sorts of attributes on them from other applications, like what did Web Filter Lite think about this, and what did Ad Blocker do with it, and what did the virus blockers do with it. Now you can view those different columns from the other apps in the same event log viewer. The default view obviously is custom for that app, the defaults, but you can view what, say, Web Filter Lite thought about it, and it'll throw in a column. In this case, we don't run Web Filter Lite, so it's blank. But and the same occurs for sessions. When you're looking at sessions, you can view all sorts of metadata that previously you couldn't view before. This is a global filter, so let's just say I'm really quick, want to search for Dropbox-related stuff. I can just type that in, and any field that has Dropbox in it is going to show up. I can click Clear Filters at any time to basically get rid of the filters. The other thing I can do is change the number of events I view. So this allows you to more easily look at more events if you want to, in the UI, kind of probe around. As always, you can just export it, which will give you literally everything in a big CSV file, and then you can open up Excel and do all sorts of crazy things. But if you're just in here real quick and you say, well, I need to see more events than that, you can now go up to 50,000. So let's say I had an issue yesterday and I wanted to see what was going on 2 p.m. Now you can actually select by date as well. So let's say I wanted to see between 2 and 3 from yesterday. I can now say I only want to see events between 2 and 3. And now when I hit refresh, it's going to query the database specifically for those events and download all, I guess, 2,700 events between those hours yesterday. And now I can filter and all those things by this specific time frame. So this provides a lot better ability to kind of view the data. As always, you can export it and literally get the whole data and do whatever you want. But this provides an easier way to do that within the UI itself. So hopefully people will be really happy with those changes. They definitely help, having used them for a while on our side. They're a significantly better way to view the events on your Untangle server. The event log and web filter is the same as the event log and web filter Lite. They're identical. Reading through the other. Okay, a couple last things. Under the covers, we moved to Java 7, which is a big move. Moved to Tomcat 7. That helps with memory usage, a bunch of other nice changes that I won't go too much into. I will address this one just in case, because I'm sure. Application control lights, we did remove the signatures by default. We had a lot of issues with people turning on signatures they shouldn't be. So you can always get the signatures in the wiki. You can download them and import them. But beware in doing so. There's a huge warning here that's really important to read. So be careful when you're configuring application control light. Misconfiguring it causes a lot of problems. So hopefully that change will prevent people from misconfiguring it quite as often. A bunch of other performance on ad blocker and a bunch of other fixes. And again, you can always look in Bugzilla and see all the different changes if you want to follow along with our development and the things that we're fixing from version to version. Any other questions you think worth getting into? I am sure there's some things I didn't cover, but if you have more questions about any of this stuff, please jump on forums.untangle.com or contact sales at sales.untangle.com or info.untangle.com. We would love to help you more. Sean, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's it. If we jump to the contacting sales is really the best resource for people. So we want to make sure that everyone knows that we're here to help. We want to make sure that you have an optimized experience on Untangle, and these new features are awesome. So we really appreciate your time as well as all the developers that joined in with our team to make these come to pass. We really appreciate that.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for using Untangle. We hope you're happy with 10.1. I'd love to hear your feedback. Jump on the forums or contact us if you have more questions. Thank you, everybody.
Fantastic. Thanks.